So it's been a while since you purchased a home, or is it the first time? Or maybe you just want to see what's changed here in 2022 and 2023. Well, we're going to talk about that in this episode. I'm William Smith with the William Smith Luxury Group, and let's get started. Okay, so buyers, here you are. You want to buy a house. Well, let's get you ready. What does it mean to get ready? Well, you're going to get ready by, number one, first of all, figure out what your finances are. Get ready by making sure you know what neighborhood and school system you want, and even where you're going to move to. So all of those things will be part of the formula. And one of the very first things you have to do is to get pre-qualified. We've talked about this before in some of our other videos, but we're going to put together a package of you getting ready for all the important things. So don't buy any neighborhood until you drive through it. Make sure you know about the schools. If you have school-age children, make sure you know about the facilities and medical if you are retired. We have a lot of people coming to the Monterey Peninsula from all over the world, and they have no clue of what is available in each of the communities. So that's the first part, is make sure that you understand that there are lots of variances in every little neighborhood that you go to. The other thing is, if you're going to finance, make sure that you're financing with your best opportunities through the lender of your choice. If you don't know who to go to, talk to your realtor, and they will have somebody that they've had experience with and they have vetted for you. So when you're getting ready, you make the decision, and now you know that you're ready to get started. Well, one of the things you need to do early in the process is choose your buyer agent. Well, you say you'd like to work with the listing agent. A year ago, maybe even up to 6 months ago, that would have been a strategy that worked for some. But you need a professional who's advocating for you. And that's very important, because when the listing agent listed that property, they made promises to that seller to get that price up. And you need an advocate to get that price down. So when you have the whole picture with your agent, and they know what your family needs are, what your financial situation is, when you're going to move and when you're going to move out, and what your game plan is over the, say, the next 5 to 7 years. So when you have that advocate and you trust them, stick with them and they'll find the right property for you. Now, obviously, if the match isn't a good match, end it quickly or early, and make sure that you're upfront about what is going on with that process. But we're going to move on. You have your realtor. They are your confidant. You trust them just like you trust your attorney and your accountant. So let's go ahead and move forward. So now you're looking through the different properties that you've seen. Most good listing agents will get their sellers to have a disclosure package. I call it a power pack. So that power pack includes your inspections. It includes your disclosures, and it gives you the opportunity to know what the preliminary title report looks like, underlying things like the conditions, covenant, and restrictions of a neighborhood, the homeowners association, HOA documents, and make sure that you can do what you want to. Let's say you want to put a swimming pool in, and you find out that you're in the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District area, and there's no water available for you. You need to know that before you start negotiating on a property. One case I heard of, the lot was too small to put the swimming pool size that they wanted to, but the listing agent had advertised that the lot was bigger. Well, you need to find out in the description of the property with the county records just how big that lot is, so you can do the things that you want to do. So get the property vetted better than you have been able to do in the last 2 years. And that's something that this market, with the higher interest rates, it's increased the inventory, lengthened the market times. It's still a bit of a seller's market because we are still short of some inventory, but you at least have a time to take a deep breath and say, okay, I'm ready to make the commitment to this property. And when you're doing your investigations, you can find out a lot of these important questions. So make sure that you have all of the information you can get prior to making your offer. And when you do make your offer, and make sure that you are faithful to the negotiation process. Meaning, make a reasonable offer. Understand that the seller may not agree with your price. They'll counter you. You make your offer on a residential purchase agreement. They'll make their first response to you on the seller counteroffer number 1. And then you'll make a response to them if you don't accept it on a buyer counteroffer number 1. And if they don't like your offer, they'll come back with a seller counteroffer number 2. And if you don't like that, it's buyer counteroffer number 2, and so on. So I've had negotiations go back and forth over several weeks, even several months sometimes. And as long as the buyer agent and the listing agent, the buyer and seller are focused on making the negotiation work, and there's a deal there, it will work. Now, obviously, if it's not a good fit, if you have found out what you need to find out about the property and you've put in your highest and best, let the listing agent know and then move on to the next property. So the negotiations go on, but let's say that you've found the property, you've made the negotiations, you have a fully ratified contract, and you take it to the escrow company. Now, the escrow company is going to ask you to follow the timeline of the contract in the California Association of Realtors contract. It's basically, you need to have your earnest money deposit put into the escrow within 3 days after the close of escrow. You need to make sure that you have your financing started someplace within 7 days. And then you have 17 days to do your inspections, to make sure that you have your financing approved, make sure that you have your appraisal, and make sure the property meets your needs while you inspect it, because you'll find out things about the property during those 17 days inspection period. So let's say that the 17 days has completed and you have discovered some things that you don't like about the property and you need to go ahead and renegotiate some of it. What does that mean? Well, you've got a report that said there was something underneath the house that you should check. That was in the home inspection, and now you got somebody to go there and check it a little bit more. Somebody that did some checking of the engineering, the foundation. Maybe there was some plumbing leak that had some evidence, but you had to dig a little deeper to find out. And now you've discovered that it's $17,000 to repair the unknown problem. And now you're going to ask the seller in a request for repairs. It's called an RR form. A request for repairs, and you're going to then ask them to pay that $17,000 and get it repaired, or to discount the price $17,000, or credit you the $17,000 so that you can move on. Now, the seller might say, well, wait a minute. It was in the home inspection that there was this leak. We negotiated an as-is property. This is a used house, not a new house. We're going to stick with the price. And they said, well, wait a minute. We'll give you $5,000 credit toward your closing costs. I'll give you more money up front, so then you can go ahead and do the repairs yourself when you do the rest of the remodel you're doing on this older house. Well, the buyers say, well, wait a minute. I don't know what to do because we don't have enough to do the things that we want to do. And the negotiation goes back and forth. But let's say that you come to terms. You've gone to the seller response for the buyer request for repairs. That's an RR form. And now everybody's agreed, and it's going to be $7,000 that the seller's going to credit at the close of escrow, and the buyer's going to take on the responsibility of fixing the work. So that now is done. And let's say it's around day 17 that the negotiation started. Now it's day 19 of the 30-day escrow. And you're ready to get everything else done. The appraisal came in right. The contingencies have been removed. And now your property has gone to pending status. So when it was active, It was active status when it was contingent upon the investigation and the loan approval and the appraisal. That was active contingent, and that still shows up online. Outlets like Realtor.com or Zillow will have it that it's a contingent sale. But when it goes pending, I know in Zillow it doesn't show up anymore. People call up and say, well, why isn't it on Zillow anymore? Is it back available? It is pending, and when it closes, it'll reappear online as a closed escrow, and you'll have an opportunity to know what the sales price was. So now you've gotten everything done, and you're just waiting for the bank to get the final loan docs sent to you. The documents are on their way. They're going to be signed by you. A mobile notary is going to find you at your home, at your office, or at a public place. And let's say you don't live in town. Let's say the seller doesn't live in town. The mobile notaries will get that information back to the escrow company. And here in Central and Northern California, the title companies and the escrow companies are usually the same. I know that in Southern California, they usually are separate. You have an escrow company, and then you have a different title insurance company. Well, we have a title and escrow, and in our area, the popular ones are Old Republic Title and Chicago Title. So with that, we've got the documents being readied. All the last minute things are going to be done. If there were going to be some repairs, they're going to be done. And now we get to the close of escrow. And maybe the seller wants to stay a few days. We've talked about, should you let a seller remain in possession? Well, if you do, and it's for a couple of days, usually say, sure, just move out and over the weekend and we'll move in on Monday. Make sure that you've got the utilities lined up. There's nothing worse than having the moving truck there and you're ready to go and there's no electricity because it was turned off, but you didn't turn it on. Let's make sure that that first time that the disposal company is supposed to come pick up your garbage, that they know that you're the new owner. And then let's make sure that you've got your internet and your cable set up. So all of these things are going to be happening right from the time that you remove the contingencies and loan docs are ready. You've got about 13 days in that 30-day example that we have. So let's say that the sellers had agreed to stay and they wanted 3 more weeks because the house they're moving to is going to be ready for 3 weeks after the close of escrow because they needed to close their escrow, but they needed the money from your sale in order for that to happen. All right. It's reasonable for a buyer to ask for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, and many homeowners' fees during that time. So that's something that you can go ahead and negotiate, obviously, before the final contingencies are removed so that everybody's in sync and anticipating that. Then if you're the buyer, and let's say that you're going to do some remodeling and you are renting and you want to time it so that you don't have to pay double rent and mortgage any longer than you have to, make sure that your property manager knows what is going on with your schedule. And a lot of times you can negotiate out of a lease because a lot of times a landlord can raise the new tenant's rent higher than they can with yours with the restrictions in California. And so a negotiation can usually take place. The landlord will often ask you to cover any vacancy time they have, but that's usually short-lived because on the Monterey Peninsula, we just do not have enough rental inventory. So with all of that happening, let's say you're moving in 3 weeks after the close of escrow. Now all the utilities are in your name, everything's set up, and now it's moving day. Well, first of all, make sure you make a reservation with your mover a month or 2 in advance if you have a feeling once you get your accepted that it's going to happen, and then confirm with them when you remove your contingencies. So you have 13 more days before close of escrow, and then plus whatever time after close of escrow it's going to take for you to move, because movers are busy, a lot of activity going on right now, and you need to make sure that you have your place. Or if you're going to rent a truck, U-Haul is very difficult to predict when they're going to have that. So you don't want to make a a telephone call a week before your moving date because they may not have the vehicles for you. So those are all things that a buyer, and usually a first-time home buyer, would have to deal with. Now, an experienced buyer, obviously, if it's a cash deal, you're going to want to make sure that you get the most value for that cash position, or you might look at some alternatives because there might be some ways for you to get some very low interest rates and keep your cash in an account that's yielding you a higher interest rate. So those are all things that you might want to discuss as well. So we've covered a lot of territory on what it means to buy in this changing market. We do see lots of opportunities for buyers that weren't there even just 6 months ago. Interest rates were lower, but so were some of these prices that were being asked and some of the frenzy that got built up when people were competing and doing overbids to beat the competition. Well, it's still basically a seller's market, and probably will be through Q3 and Q4 of 2022, but you've got a little bit more time so you can make a smarter decision. I'm going to venture to say that there have been a lot of buyers in the last 2 years that have purchased some homes that they weren't 100% in love with because they had to make a decision and it was just so scarce with the inventory. Fortunately, it's starting to be a more balanced where there's enough inventory coming to the market that covers the buyer demand. So with all of that, I want to invite you to write your questions or comments in the comments section. And thank you very much for joining me, William Smith, from the William Smith Lecture Group at Coldwell Banker Realty in Carmel, California, here on our YouTube channel. If you like what you see, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much. See you next time.